Okay, thanks for joining everybody. Welcome to a special pre-recorded Friday stream here on August 22nd, 2025. This week in crypto, we're going to be talking a little bit about the Ethereum tease of its new all-time high, getting to 48.34, just inches away from that 48.66 all-time high that's been long-standing. Also, Chainlink on a huge run. I know the Chainlink Marines out there are very excited to see the decoupling going on with the 11th ranked market cap. Meanwhile, Bitcoin is looking to regain that 120K mark right now, sitting around 117K at the time of this recording. We talked a couple days ago about a big signal of negative sentiment surging in after a bunch of retail was getting frustrated trying to buy the dip and seeing it not really come to fruition. As soon as they gave up, what do you know? We see that turnaround, markets start to bounce. And obviously, Bitcoin's done okay in terms of a recovery, but it's really been the top caps like Ethereum and Chainlink, even Solana and a few others have got some nice traction, XRP a little bit as well. But really the big news today specifically was Jerome Powell's hinting of a rate cut. I know this has been a long-standing tease for many traders who are hoping to see an economic not retrace, but a cut of current interest rates, which would spark greater corporate gains and stock market surges. And with crypto being so associated with the S&P 500, global stock markets in general for pretty much around 3.5 years now, early 2022 is when it really became noticeable how correlated they were, and institutionals were first really starting to make their presence felt in a way that was tangibly noticeable on charts. So crypto would stand to benefit and does appear already to be benefiting just off of this news. Remember that it's just rumors for now, right? Powell's discussion during his Jackson Hole speech, he noted rising risks to the labor market and said shifting balance of risks may warrant policy adjustments. Most people view that as a dovish tone, meaning leaning towards that rate cut end of the spectrum. And the September rate cut would, of course, change a lot of things. But as mentioned, that's the September rate cut. Today's August 22nd. We're seeing a lot of presumptions and prices starting to get baked in with anticipation of that rate cut coming to fruition, without September actually, being here yet. So this is a clear buy the rumor scenario. It doesn't mean it's a sell the news situation. There can be a lot of other factors that kind of make markets ebb and flow between now and around 3 weeks from now. But keep in mind that what we're looking at here as the top trending story on sentiment, this is the primary driver, and it's noticeable in the S&P 500 as well. I can show you the correlation between Bitcoin, the S&P 500, and gold's price. They're all going up in tandem, and this is very synonymous with any sort of dovish news coming from the Fed. The S&P 500 notably made a new all-time high again today. That's certainly significant after it was retracing for the past week or so. And anytime we make an all-time high, we tend to see Bitcoin kind of have a little bit of a run itself. As you can see with this July 5th, 6th all-time high, Bitcoin goes on a huge surge. There's some bearish divergences here where the S&P 500 goes up, but Bitcoin goes down, especially if S&P starts to retrace. But for now, consider this a pretty good sign. I mean, this is just the past 3 months of correlation. I can go back. We'll just go all the way back to 22. Why not? And you can see how tied all three have really been. We need to get Bitcoin off of 5 minutes so it doesn't take quite so long to load. Let's try just an hour. So there you go. I mean, there are moments where the S&P 500 goes way ahead and then Bitcoin plays catch up. Vice versa, Bitcoin went way ahead here compared to the S&P, and then it had a bit of a larger retrace. But for now, they look pretty tight. So as long as, stock markets around the world are thriving the way they have been, I would call that a pretty strong sign that Bitcoin can get close to that 124K all-time high that it just made. What was it? Yeah, just about 9-ish days ago. So we're in a good spot overall, with more money expected to be poured in, and we're getting a very positive reaction, maybe a little too positive of a reaction. You might not be surprised to see things flatten out or come back down to earth partially over the next few days, especially as the weekend kicks off and people take a bit of a break. But Monday and Tuesday should be very telling. This is, of course, just a very broad look at what we're seeing with the markets, but we can get a little more specific now. Just to name a few other big stories, we'll skip the Cracker Barrel redesign, which has been a very viral story and of course has bled a little bit into crypto, as big stories always do. But Kanye West's launch of the Yeezy meme coin on Solana went up to a $3 billion market cap and then went all the way back down below $1 billion. And this is, the classic celebrity meme coin story. Many of you remember the Hawk coin and many other out there. Jason Derulo's coin. I won't get into all of them because frankly, we don't cover meme coins nearly as much as the top caps and many of the Ethereum based altcoins, but you can see how big of a story this was with 56,000 wallets suffering losses. A lot of people have known Kanye for a long time. So when he launches a meme coin, people jump in knowing the risks of celebrity meme coins, and it becomes a pure gamble. Are you getting in early enough? And then can you sell off enough before the crowd jumps in? So people know the risks, but there are still people who made plenty of money as the coin surged up to 3 billion. I would fathom many more people lost money than gained money, but you get the idea. There's still that itch from the gamble-centric meme coin community where they want to take their chances. So we always just say buyer beware when it comes to meme coins. It's kind of a chaotic Wild West out there, and probably always will be, especially with celebrity-tied meme coins. Below that, you can just see the general Friday market buzz, and right away it mentions the Fed, Powell's speech and President Trump's noon announcement. Traders expect volatility as Powell's remarks could influence monetary policy view. And Trump also spoke and added political uncertainty, stirring cautious sentiment. We'll look at sentiment here now. I want to highlight the pretty vast difference between the positive and negative sentiment ratio we've seen over the past couple of weeks. Just open this up. Last 6 months, that's fine. So you can see how positive, as I was talking about, people got very positive trying to buy the dip, assuming it would just go right back up to that 124K all-time high when it got down to 116. That didn't happen. And all of a sudden you see this very negative sentiment, which was actually the lowest we had seen since early July. And that signaled we were getting close to a bottom, because this was indicative of retailers finally selling off and saying, you know what? I made enough money by buying back here. So I'm just going to jump out. And when that happened, we waited a couple days, but eventually we got our pop, which is of course aided by the Fed rate cut optimism going on right now. And then if we look at Ethereum, which is of course very much in the news right now, inching very close to its all-time high and could be at an all-time high by the end of the day. Look at this surge. I mean, it was just massive all of a sudden. Bitcoin had a minor boost, but Ethereum's was much, much greater. And sentiment isn't really responding that much. That's what's fascinating about this. You see the many moments where you get this big euphoric spike, well over a 2-to-1 bullish versus bearish ratio across social media. Same one here. And in both cases, prices immediately retrace, the two biggest ones over the last 6 months. So if we start seeing something like that and, over the next 24 hours, suddenly people are saying, sell your Bitcoin, buy into Ethereum, that's when you need to get nervous, because it means that retail is FOMOing in at an alarming rate that is synonymous with upcoming retraces. All right. A few other points about the Powell situation and some of this general social sentiment going on. Here's the past 3 months with pretty tight 4-hour intervals of mentions of any words that include Fed, rate, rates, cut, or Powell. And you can see pretty clearly there have been 3 big spikes if we just look at social dominance. One back here in mid-June, which was right before a retrace because about a week later we had the Iran and US and Israel conflict really make world news. So that was a bit of a noisy one that we can't directly correlate. Here, though, I think this one's pretty clear. Lots of people optimistic about a rate cut here at the end of July, and then we immediately drop. One more here. This is by far the biggest. Let's even go back a year. We'll just zoom out to 1 day each. There we go. There we go. Okay. So yeah, this is the biggest social dominance spike since it looks like, yeah, it's bigger than that. So all the way back to September, right after Trump got elected. And of course, this was related to him talking about getting rid of Gensler and all these other things going on, his crypto-friendly approach when he finally gets inaugurated in January, which of course ended up being the top for crypto for quite a while. But we saw kind of a mixed reaction here because there wasn't much changing at that time. It was just Trump talking about how he's aiming for rate cuts and a more crypto-friendly process. But this is pretty much the biggest since then. We're talking about just about a year ago. And typically, if you see a really bullish reaction, it's a bit emotional. It's sentiment driven. And we usually see some sort of sign that prices are going to come back down to earth. I wouldn't say this is like a top or anything, but it does mean that there's a little too much euphoria in the air based on this topic alone, and just hinting alone. And it can sometimes be a self-fulfilling cycle. Like if markets go nuts and we see, the S&P just continue to make all-time high after all-time high over the next week or two, that could change the Fed's approach. And maybe they were planning for a cut, but because there's so much corporate thriving and economic thriving, there's no need for a cut anymore, and they stand pat. So it's kind of a complex issue, but I'll just leave it at that. I think that it's undoubtable that today's rally is based on the optimism and the dovish approach that appeared from Powell's discussions, but let's wait and see. But it's very notable that there's an 11-month high here in terms of rate cuts. All right, switching gears, another way to look at sentiment, which I really like, is just looking at the words higher or above in relation to Bitcoin or BTC. Same with lower or below related to Bitcoin or BTC. When you see super high blue bars, that means there's a lot of people that are talking about Bitcoin going higher, and that very often comes with tops, as you can see here. When there's a lot of red, you tend to see a lot of bottoms form, like we saw around here. This was, the two highest reds. Let me take off the shared axis so it's easier to see. Two highest reds over the last 3 months were both associated pretty much with bottoms. I know this one was a couple days delayed, but you get the idea. Even this one here, that one's kind of a complex one because both were very high, higher and lower. But yeah, right now, it actually looks like there's a little bit of a bias toward higher. You can see this is the highest blue candle we saw since about 8 days ago, but that led to prices going down. So sentiment is definitely looking a little bit bullish in terms of this approach. And then if we switch to Ethereum, there isn't much. The higher bars are quite low and dormant at the moment. And same with lower. They're both kind of just chilling out. And this just goes back to Ethereum being under the radar. I'm sure as soon as it hits that all-time high or crosses above, assuming it does, the mainstream media will start to make headlines about it, talking about the big milestone. I think it's been 5 years or 4 years. I won't bother to look at the exact time that it hit that 48.66 all-time high. But I remember it's been quite a while, and the mainstream media will certainly make a lot of publications about it because it's low-hanging fruit when that happens. And then a lot of the mainstream retailers and more common novice traders will jump in on Ethereum because they salivate when they see all-time high and they think it's just going to keep going. And that's when you might see a big spike in higher, which would signal a top. So watch for that. But for now, the runway is clear. And I still like the chances of Ethereum potentially making an all-time high by today or early next week, assuming the weekend kind of has a bit of a hibernation. Okay, so we talked about several topics so far in terms of the correlations, some of the social reactions so far. Now let's look at some of the main metrics, and we'll do this for both Bitcoin and Ethereum. In terms of utility, not much to say for Bitcoin. It's kind of staying neutral at the moment. We'd ideally like to see, a pretty close, tight-knit transaction volume from the top that we saw back in mid-July, but it has been going pretty far down. It's not like it's dropping off a cliff. It's just kind of back in the area it was in April and May and all the way to late June or so. And then if we look at this, I know this is a very noisy chart, so I'm just going to hide these for a moment. And if we just look at daily active addresses, pretty much the same thing. It's kind of fallen back to neutral. If we look at circulation, same thing. It's dropped back to neutral. And then network growth, a little more flat. So there's still quite a few Bitcoin new addresses being created on a daily basis. MVRV wise, so we still have a pretty neutral MVRV in terms of 30-day average returns. It's because Bitcoin has made a very mild rebound after it's retraced from the all-time highs. So you have all these people who bought in here and are still down quite a bit. And the people who finally bought a dip are the ones who kind of brought the average back to right around neutral. But the long term, sitting at about plus 18.5%, that means average returns are still pretty high. And buying now, if you're planning on investing for a year or the long term, it comes with a little more risk than the average time for Bitcoin. That's all this means. It's not in like an extreme danger zone area. Like if we get over plus 25%, like we were back in mid-July during that all-time high, that's a danger zone, but we're still kind of in a risky spot. So just keep that in mind for Bitcoin. Funding rate, also very important. Nothing crazy on BitMEX. We are seeing some longing signs going on Binance though. So I'd be a bit worried about that. Generally, markets are easiest to buy into from like a mathematical justification when we see a lot of negative bars like this. But right now it's up a little bit, and that means that people are opening up some of those margin and leverage longs, hoping to capitalize on Bitcoin getting back to that 124K all-time high. Whale transactions pretty flat, nothing too special on either side. 1 million or more is kind of hanging in there still. 100K or more has dropped down a little bit more. I'll get to the key stakeholders in just a moment. Just checking to see if there's anything worth noting here. Yeah, mean dollar invested age is showing it's kind of flat over the last week or so. That this line not going up is a good thing, because that would mean that the prices our wallets are getting stagnant again, but there's at least enough dormant movement to keep this line kind of in the lower range. There's a little bit of network realized profits going on, but not nearly what we saw here, as we were seeing plenty of profits to justify that we would continue to go up and up. Like this spike here on July 4th was a great sign. So we're hoping to see a little more realized profits continuing to trickle in, because that indicates that retailers are taking their profits, institutionals are scooping up the loose coins, and they're going to drive up prices even more. Also interesting is the fact that supply and exchanges has actually been going up quite a bit. Going back to June 9th, there was about 1.17 million Bitcoin on exchanges. Now there's about 1.24 million. So almost 70K more Bitcoin on exchanges. That's almost a 6% jump. A little worrisome. We'd like to see it stay down. And this is one of the rare times over the last few years we've actually seen a pretty sustained interval of time where it's gone up. Yeah, social dominance kind of back to earth. I don't think Ethereum is taking too much away from it because it isn't being talked about to a significant degree, but Chainlink, Cardano, XRP, a few meme coins out there, even the Yeezy stuff, they've all kind of taken away and cannibalized the social dominance of the top assets a bit. RSI is right around neutral for Bitcoin, worth noting. And look at the total amount of non-empty wallets. They've really been surging lately, especially here at the beginning of August. You saw this big jump, and it's always going to kind of be going up to new all-time highs, barring something catastrophic. Currently, there's now 56.55 million non-empty Bitcoin wallets out there. I'm going to switch to Ethereum and go over the same metrics here because Ethereum is a very important topic right now. You can see it's currently sitting at about 47.89, getting up to 48.34-ish or so today. So very close to that all-time high, retraced just a little bit. And just like Bitcoin, the transaction volume has been dropping off a bit. In terms of network growth, actually a pretty serious drop. I'm a little surprised by it, but yeah, we got up to about 133, 134K new addresses being created at the end of July on that given day, July 30th. And now it's more in the 136, 137 range. I'm sorry, I'm reading it wrong. The 193K was that top here on July 30th. It actually got all the way to 257K on June 24th. And it's kind of hovering around 135 to 145K now. MVRV, big jumps because obviously Ethereum is outperforming Bitcoin pretty significantly at the moment. This is around a danger zone. Plus 15% or above for altcoins is where it starts to get dicey, and we see a lot of retraces for coins. We've seen Ethereum go well above plus 15% a couple times already over the last few months, but we're approaching that once again. And, you know, right now it's setting up to potentially just inch above an all-time high and then have a bunch of FOMOers get punished. Not investment advice. I obviously can't predict the future, and that's not what these calls are about. We're just here to read off the metrics and guide you on how we typically understand them. But what I'm seeing here is a bit of scariness in terms of the short term, and then a lot of scariness on the long term, where the average returns are way up at about plus 58.5% right now. And that's very close to as high as we've seen. Just last week, we got all the way up to plus 62, 63%. Yeah, about 9 days ago. So not great in terms of the risk. It doesn't mean prices can't inch up a little bit more, but you'd be doing so while the competing traders out there are already up significantly on their investments when it's normally a zero-sum game going back all time for any asset. That's how trading works. So your best bet is to buy when they're both low and well below 0%. If you can't wait that long, you may want to at least consider waiting until they drop down to earth a little bit more. Funding rate, pretty similar to Bitcoin. You can see all the longs that have been sprinkled in, and there's very few shorts right now. Binance is well up there. DYDX, hard to see, but you can see some bright green poking out. And BitMEX is kind of a little above neutral as well. So there's some longing going on, and that's a concern. Whale transactions, kind of the same as Bitcoin, peaked around mid-August and has dropped back. But you can still see with Ethereum, it's significantly higher than where we were back in May, pretty much the rest of the year. Unlike Bitcoin, so mean dollar invested age for Ethereum is showing a lot of dormant wallets continuing to move. So this is a good long-term sign for Ethereum. You know, once it does go through its peaks and valleys and the zero-sum game starts to come back into play a little more, and if we neutralize, this is a sign that stagnant wallets have been moving lots and lots of older investments, and this typically drives markets upward because it brings coins that have been sitting and been stagnant back into circulation. And right now, we're continuing to see that trend that has been going on for about a month and a half now. The mean dollar invested age has dropped by about 6% in just a month and a half. That's a very significant drop. And unlike Bitcoin, look at all these network realized profits. Also a good mid or long-term sign. Prices go up, tons of retailers taking realized profits here, with this spike being the latest one, kind of competing with these. Yes, I know we saw a correction around here, but this is more of a mid or long-term signal. So a 1 week correction is not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. You should still be rooting for a lot of realized profits because that's what brings the MVRV back to neutral. That's what allows institutionals to eat up and accumulate those coins and then drive up prices more for the smaller fish out there. And also, unlike Bitcoin, look at how much Ethereum supply and exchanges have been dropping. This could be due to a lot of the DeFi and staking options out there for Ethereum that aren't as relevant for Bitcoin. But regardless, this is a good sign considering the amount of coins that are just continuing to move into cold wallets and storage for safekeeping rather than being ready to be sold off on exchanges. Yeah, Ethereum's social dominance is getting a little more spike now. Like I said, it's still not getting quite as much discussion as you may expect for, with being within 1% of a new all-time high. But I think that it is starting to garner some attention, and you can expect this to explode if and when it finally crosses above that 48.66 all-time high threshold. Yeah, so the RSI is a little more concerning. This is to be expected when you see a coin outperforming Bitcoin significantly. It's up around 69.70 or so. If we go back, let's just go back exactly 4 months ago. Yeah, its price is up about 167%. So you're rarely going to see a negative RSI or something below 50 when the price has gone up that considerably. And then total amount of holders, Ethereum still leads all of crypto in this category. It's pretty much always going up, and it's going up at a pretty normal rate right now, sitting at about 155.48 million non-empty wallets. Also wanted to cover the alpha narratives or the crypto narratives page just to see when many of the relevant topics in crypto have seen their biggest outliers from the rest of the discussions going on. Look at this huge spike in Ethereum's price. If we line this up, so this was between the 16th and 17th, we'll call it the 16th. So this was when it was very polarizing right after it nearly hit its all-time high last time, took a little dip, then it was starting to come back up. So I think that has a lot to do with why the discussions were booming right here when people were speculating whether this was the buy point or the sell point. And from a short-term perspective, it actually ended up being the sell point. So Ethereum's price, huge spike right there. AI was a big topic at the beginning of the week. You can see Bitcoin price had its big moment pretty much right after its all-time high. Very small bump in Israel and Palestine discussions in the middle of the week. You can see Chainlink. I won't cover the entire metrics for Chainlink today. Just know that, I can pull it up right here and at least show you the sentiment. And it's been decoupled from the rest of the markets a bit as well. You'll see a big spike today after the price loads. So look at that. It's up to 27.10 or 27.11 at this time. It's the highest we've seen its price. Let's just zoom this price out a little bit. Get it to load. Yeah, highest price we've now seen since December 2024. So we are at a year-to-date all-time high for Chainlink. That's going to make a lot of Chainlink Marines very happy. GameFi seeing a bit of a bump. We have meme coins having a midweek spike. I wouldn't be surprised if we see one more meme coin rally maybe by the end of today, and that would signal a upcoming cool-off period for all of crypto, because that's a greed signal. Sleep quality, interestingly, getting a spike in interest. Art, Dogecoin getting a jump. Iris, you can see Morph Layer here in the middle. Some of you may know more about Morph Layer than I've researched, and you may know the context behind why. Alt season at the very beginning of the week was getting some discussion. This was right after Bitcoin's all-time high, and then altcoins took off, and then everything retraced a bit until right around the 18th and 19th. Pretty typical there. NFTs seeing a little bit of a jump, Kaido seeing a bit of a jump, and vibe coding getting a discussion. I'm just curious what the AI context is. Suggesting a strong focus on building and engineering in the crypto industry. There's excitement around upcoming projects and coins with mentions of industrial scale vibes engineering. Proof of vibe coding. Vibe in the crypto community seems positive and forward looking. So yeah, I think there's some cool stuff you can find on the Alpha Narratives page here. Feel free to explore it yourself and let us know what you find. And I want to cap off this video by looking at our activity matrix again. It's been a few weeks since we last looked, but the colors of each of these labels is the important part, and they're kind of all over the place. So very red, like we see with API3 or Band or OKB. These are indicative of very hot networks. You can even see Chainlink over here, tons of red, indicating it's seeing its highest marks in terms of activity addresses, active addresses, network growth, whale transactions, even exchange outflow and inflow, social dominance. These are very hot, indicating they're at around 3-month highs. That's the interval of time that I look for on these charts. So Chainlink is one of the many assets seeing very hot network activity, whereas assets like AMP or ELF or Telcoin or USDD or XYO, a lot of pretty obscure coins, FTX token, funny, Civic. These are coins that are seeing very, very little activity and are well below their 3-month averages. So typically the way to look at this is the red ones or orange ones are at risk of a potential turnaround. High activity signals a greater likelihood of moving back down if it's been going up a lot, or going up if it had been going down a lot. It's a trend reversal signal. So let's look at the leaderboard here, and we can see a more text-based understanding of where a lot of these coins sit. So you can see activity address rank leaders. These numbers mean it's like their first biggest day of the last 3 months, second biggest day, third biggest day. You get the idea. So these 4 tokens are having, or just had in the last full 24-hour period, their largest active address day. Gatechain, ICX, MX token, and OKB. Gatechain and OKB are significant because they're actually top 50 market caps, so worth paying attention to. Network growth, we see one coin that hit its highest in the past 3 months. That's MX token. So highest active address and network growth day for MX token. Whale transactions, we see 2 3-month highs for Band and Phala. Positive versus negative sentiment, we see extreme positive sentiment for Phala. That's a bit of a top signal, so be careful of that. Social dominance, the highest day of the past 3 months just happened for OKB, Synthetics, and Wax. Exchange flow, just one. We see Convex seeing a significant amount of outflow, which is a good sign. You don't want to see a lot of inflows like we're seeing for UMA, Band, or API3 right now. In terms of mean dollar invested age, Convex and ICX just hit 3-month highs, meaning there's a lot of dormant tokens moving back into circulation, typically a good sign. Age consumed, we see Convex. And then overall, if you just want to look for the hottest networks that kind of combine these 8 categories, ICX is up there, Chainlink at number 2, Phala, API 3, we'll do the full top 10, Chiliz, Layer 0, Gate Chain, Band, Meme, and there's MX token again. So yeah, pay attention to this activity matrix model. Drop us a message on Discord if you need help setting it up yourself. We're happy to get you all geared up so you can check on it on a daily basis. It's 24-hour based, so this isn't once every hour. Just refresh it once per day and you'll get some really interesting insights and likely find some anomalies that the rest of crypto isn't paying any attention to. And you can capitalize on that and find a lot of trend reversals, entry points or exit points. But yeah, that's about it. I'd say, considering Ethereum in particular is not seeing quite the amount of FOMO you may expect, even though it is seeing a bit of an uptick in social dominance. I think this is a good sign that Ethereum may zoom toward 5K very soon, assuming that Bitcoin can hold up itself, not fall off heading into the beginning part of next week. Let's watch carefully to see the Trump and Powell situation and how realistic this green flag is about Fed rates potentially getting cut. If you see some news saying, dial it back, we're not sure we're going to be cutting rates, that would signal a pretty big retrace right away, because this whole rally is being perpetuated with the increased optimism around that. So, overall, I would expect we roll a little bit longer. We'll see if the weekend kind of just takes a bit of a chill pill, but next week should be telling, and we'll want to pay very close attention to world leaders, especially Trump, and what he says next. Tariffs are still a thing as well. Many are put on pause, but not necessarily canceled. So at any time, he may announce that there's some tariffs pending for a new country or an increase somewhere, and that can have a negative impact on prices as well. But in the meantime, folks, thanks for watching. Drop your comments. Feel free to like and subscribe. It always helps us a ton as we continue to grow. And we wish you all a warm and happy weekend. Talk to y'all soon.